might manifest with sexual issues. Switch that out and put in sugar,
Hmm.
sugar addiction, put in overexercise, put in workaholism. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what gets in the way of being closer or familiar with your partner.
Yeah.
We use the word trauma a lot. It's not always a trauma. Sometimes it's just a really big wound that was never looked at. There are people who are really traumatized, but I think layers and layers of not dealing with your stuff looks like wanting to cope in whatever way is most appealing.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it's sex.
Welcome to the CoachMD podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, it's Dr. Charles, aka Coach MD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I've made it my goal to help you create a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. Today, I'm so happy that you've joined me on the Coach MD podcast with my guest, Laquilla, who is a counselor, and I'm not going to go into the details of what the type of therapy she does because I want her to tell her story and how she got into it and the type of people that she sees. But there's going to be one overarching theme in our discussion today. And the overarching theme is going to be about what is really below the surface. When we see people in our daily lives, when I saw people in my medical practice, oftentimes, I'll say more often than not, it would be situations where people would come in with a physical issue, but really when you dig a little deeper, that physical issue is really a manifestation of some challenges that one has, usually psychologically, a lot of times in their childhood, their upbringing. But in what I saw in my practice, there were the big three. The big three triggers, if you will, of physical ailments and physical complaints were: one, money, financial issues; two, health, whether it's their own health, whether their own preoccupation with their health, or a family member's health, or some other health issue; and the third is relationships. And so one of those three usually was a burden on the person coming in to see me. And I know that, Laquilla's a therapist, so it's her job, it's her duty to tease that out of somebody to see what's below the surface of their understanding to help them to to navigate that. So I'd like to maybe Laquilla, if you could maybe give us a little bit of your background and kind of how you came along this idea of wanting to be a therapist, wanting to help people in that way.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good to be
Yeah, I'm so
here on
happy.
the
I'm so
show.
happy you're here.
Thank you. I love that question. It's like, it's interesting because I had to choose. Well, I don't want to say I had to. I got to choose what I wanted to do, right? And I had two main goals of what I wanted to be. One was like a missionary, the other was to be a therapist. 'Cause I love people. I really love people. So I landed on marriage and family therapy. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in New York State. And yeah, I chose to be this and get here just because I love people and I love God. And my counseling isn't exclusively faith based. If someone wants like traditional, that's up to them. Um, However, I know I've been loved really well
Mm,
in places of pain or places of like hiding. And, God sees me and it has made me stronger and more open to just be like, okay, God, here's my heart. Here's what's really going
mm,
on. And I love people. I'm like, more people need to know what it's
Right.
like to be loved in a painful place, and like held, not
Yeah.
necessarily physically, but like a holding,
Sure.
space for
Sure.
transparency. And therapy allows that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and the fact that kind of honing in on this idea of relationships now, and that's your specialty. And I
Mhm.
know that that's one of the biggest triggers. I talked about money and health, but relationships in my practice in medicine, so I talk about the mind, body, and spirit. And
Mhm.
obviously, a person is all those things when they come to you as a therapist, when they came to me as a doctor. And so often, those physical complaints were people who were struggling with relationships. And those relationships,
Mhm.
usually, as you mentioned, it is that pain. There's an underlying pain. And um,
Mhm.
I know in some of the writings that I've done, and I've talked about this. I've defined what I call the automatic brain, which is our
Mhm.
primitive, our animal nature, which responds only to danger, threat, or vulnerability, causing us to
Mhm.
fight or flee, and that often shows up in terms of pain. So if
Yeah.
you could, tell us a little bit, Laquilla, about the kind of the relationship breakdowns, kind of the things that are big in in
Mhm.
in your practice with obviously, we're not getting into details, but just in general, the scenarios that kind of play out that you've been seeing in your practice with the relationships.
Oh, that's okay. So, I like that you said the fight or flight, and I say fight, flight, or freeze, and befriend, because
Mm,
like a subside is like the over the overworking of trying to make nice,
yeah,
So
yeah,
some people they fight, some people they bucket and run,
yeah,
some people they just freeze,
yeah.
like, you don't see me, let me just not move. And then some people be friends, like, let me just play nice. So the areas that I see or that I work with mostly is couples.
Mhm.
Primarily I see couples. I'd say maybe about 60%, definitely over half
Mhm.
of who I see are couples. And outside of that are individuals, college age to
Mm.
older, like seniors, Um, and that's more individual outside of that. So I was working with families and children for a while, took a break from that, and it's mostly couples and individuals.
Yeah.
Some of the scenarios, right? For couples, I mean, there's a range from the really lovely to the very sad, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so on the lovely side, I have premarital couples, or couples who they don't believe in marriage, but they're coming because they want to strengthen like their
Mm.
relationship and learn things. There's a lot of people that live together, uh, and cohabitate or co-partnering, and so even if they're not married, they could still come and strengthen their relationship. And then with couples, the range starts to move further as you get more serious.
Mhm.
And with married couples, what I see is a lot of communication. Everyone's communication, but hmm, I work a lot with sexual issues. That is the main area that I work, or sexual trauma or sexual
Mhm.
addictions. I also work with just like the breakdown of communication. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so, it comes to mind an anecdote I saw on, a divorce attorney I know actually, who was on a very popular, YouTube channel, and he was talking about his career as a divorce attorney, and he was talking about um a man who hadn't had relations with his wife in about 6 years, and so he would, uh, was very frustrated, didn't wanna break up his marriage. She just didn't
Mhm.
want to have sex with him. So, he ended up going to very pathetically going to, like, these massage parlors and getting, uh
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
happy ending all the time. That's all he would do. He wouldn't, have intercourse with them or anything but that's what he would do, and so
Mhm.
his wife found out about it and wanted to divorce him, and the divorce attorney was representing the husband, and the wife didn't want him to, have any connection with the children. Now talk about this guy, I'm sure,
Mhm.
went to his doctor with anxiety issues,
Mhm.
with,
Mhm.
chest pain, with back aches, whatever, and I'm
Mhm.
sure he did not tell the doctor what was really going on. The divorce attorney knew more than the doctor probably knew about what was going
Mhm.
on, right? So,
Yeah.
so in the end, the divorce
Yeah.
attorney, represented his client, I think, well, and he was able to have, uh with children, visiting rights, whatever that goes. But it
Mhm.
just I know that the as you said, the younger couples when they get married, and then later on, it's happier when they get married. When they first get married, everything's so beautiful. But then as time goes on and you're living with someone,
Mhm.
things can break down. And it's really important, as I'm sure you know, is to kind of reinvigorate that relationship to try to get uh get it so when it was much younger, when you were much earlier on, and not
Mhm.
focusing on the little, just the minutia of
Mhm.
things that bug you about your partner. So Laquilla and I were chatting before we started, and I shared with her a cartoon that a friend of mine shared with me, who's is a cartoon from the New Yorker, and basically it was a picture of a therapist with a couple on the couch, and the therapist said to was talking to the couple and says, "Maureen, don't you think that the issue isn't about how your husband pronounces tomato? Maybe it has something to do with him sleeping with your sister." Okay. So, so they're focusing on how she's focusing on this little minute detail about, you know,
Mhm.
pronouncing the word tomato, and
Mhm.
it reminds me of something I read once before about putting the cap on the toothpaste, where a couple would, husband or wife would get upset with the other about not forgetting to put the cap on the toothpaste, when
Mhm.
really that's not the issue. So
Mhm.
when you see, like, someone, for instance, who is having, in a relationship, sexual dysfunction, or one of the partners is having a sex addiction outside the marriage, what what are some of the underlying uh, issues that might, be causing this, or how causing it to manifest? Would you say?
Yeah. So I have seen um, a lot of things. Typically, it's trauma,
Mm,
different kinds of traumas. It does not have to be sexual trauma. It could be physical or emotional abuse that they've gone through in their upbringing that was just never dealt with.
mm,
Um, how does it land in sexual things? I think it's because people play nice and they pretend like they're fine when they're not.
mm,
You know,
yeah.
sometimes unfortunately people don't really know each other and they get married anyway. So the idea is like when you start to fall in love, I don't believe in falling in love. I think you feel infatuated and then
There
you
you
make a
go.
decision.
Falling in lust,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it's not the same.
Right.
Um, you have to know someone, but what happens is people get infatuated and they just stay with that, and that could last for like 2 years.
Mm,
The time of infatuation. It can really like outside of a romantic relationship, the person would be labeled obsessed. You're constantly thinking about the person, you're dreaming about them, you're planning your future, you're
mm,
right. Like how you do when you're a kid, you write their name. But people decide, okay, let's go right now.
Mm,
And they link off of that without knowing someone's story and without considering their own story and
yeah.
whether or not they have dealt with their stuff.
Mm,
So it might manifest with sexual issues, the problems, but I tell people I don't care if it's sex, porn, masturbation, switch that out and put in sugar, sugar
mhm,
addiction, put in overexercise, put in workaholism. Like you could be glued into your job,
mhm.
no space for anything
Yeah,
else but just achieving. It
yeah,
doesn't matter what gets in the way of being closer or familiar with your partner. However it manifests, the deeper thing is typically some unresolved wound. I
yeah,
we use the word trauma a lot. It's not always a trauma. Sometimes it's just a really big wound that was never looked at. There are people who are really traumatized,
yeah, sure.
but I think layers and layers of not dealing with your stuff looks like wanting to cope in whatever way is most appealing.
Yeah,
And for a lot of people, it's sex, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, yeah, and it's not
Mhm.
to me, it's no surprise that it's sex because obviously that's our most primitive primal
Mhm.
instinct, and it's,
Wow.
arguably the most pleasure that one could feel in this life as far as physical pleasure. And I say arguably, but that is so. People seek the pleasure often to escape the pain, and
Mhm.
so I always had looked when somebody would come and talk to me, and as you know, I'm Coach MD, right? So I got the
Mhm.
word the term Coach MD is because patients would come to me many times more for coaching life
Mhm.
kind of evaluation rather than MD. So I kind
Mhm.
of coined that term MD because I felt helping people more by coaching them by trying to understand and in order for me to understand and to try to be a therapist in a way, not that I'm trained or licensed as one, but sometimes I was the only person who they would trust to kind of navigate through some of the traumas that they might have been feeling. And so that's where I came up with the idea of an automatic brain and the inspiration for that and my book Brain Drain is because I would start writing my patients kind of coaching words of encouragement but it
Mhm.
would always come when someone would come talk to me about a physical issue and then we'd get into some type of trauma that they had and anytime I saw that what I would look for is what are they fleeing from? What are what's the
Mhm.
pain that they're escaping? What is that they're fighting and fleeing? And you had said the idea of freezing, and the way I look at it is the fight or flight is when you're fighting and fleeing at the same time in a way, it causes
Mhm.
you to be paralyzed, to freeze. And so
Mhm.
it's still the same mechanism. It's still the same type of mechanism with the adrenaline going, the cortisol going, but many people think about that as manifesting in physical symptoms like your heart racing, you're breathing fast, the feeling you get if you see a siren or a police officer in your rear view mirror, that pounding of the heart. That's what we think of as fight or flight, but your business is
Mhm.
delving into the way our brain processes the fight or flight. And in these uh, individuals in these relationships, when they are going out, having that addiction, let's say the sexual addiction, they are running away from some type of pain. And you mentioned earlier about love and the feeling of love and how your faith. Embraces you with that love and how God's love is with you and God doesn't look at you as a woman or as
Mhm.
your skin color doesn't look at you with your physical abilities or disabilities God is in everyone or God is in no one. That's how we have to
Mhm,
look at it. So if you truly
mhm,
are a person of faith, and I know you are, but if one is truly a person of faith and truly believes in God, then they have to be all in 100%. And so
mhm,
your feeling and that feeling of love. And so in your practice, like, how do you try to help somebody feel loved so they're not running, they're not escaping the pain and
mhm,
going into something more painful? As I like to
mhm,
say, that um, short-term gain, which would be like sex,
mhm,
leads to long-term pain. Whereas
mhm.
short-term pain, kind of working out the problem, leads to long-term gain.
Yeah.
So, that kind of idea and looking at it can help
Mhm,
sometimes frame somebody's understanding. But I think the idea of love and comforting
mhm,
coming into that therapist patient client
mhm.
relationship is really huge. And so how do you kind of weave that in to help
Yeah.
numb, or help not numb, but help someone feel that they don't need to do that to get that kind of
They
false
don't need to
love, that
fight
short-term
or
pain?
run.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so I try my best to model in the relationship in therapy what I hope they would replicate in their own relationships
Mm,
outside. So I create a safe space. I create a curiosity and not judgment,
mm,
like I'm not here to be like, yes, no, right, wrong. I'm here to
mm.
be curious about how did we even get here?
Yeah.
Like how did you even get to this idea that it would be a great thing to go to someone that doesn't know you, doesn't care for
Mm,
you, doesn't cherish you, right? Is probably very, very much abused themselves to
mm,
go do the most intimate, close thing, which is sex. We
mm.
don't have that many intimate things that we do. We could
Yeah.
pray with someone, which is very intimate. We could have
Mhm.
sex with someone.
Right.
It's pretty much
Right.
the
Right.
closeness that we have,
Right.
sharing our heart or sharing our body.
Mhm.
And so if someone's in an intimate relationship, supposedly with their partner or their spouse, and then they go outside of it, there is a fight, a flight, a freeze
Mm.
happening within their relationship that they
Right.
should have the safety of drawn close to. Sometimes there is that safety, but it's stuff from the past that they have already fled from. So what I do is I try my best to maintain a safe space, a curiosity, patience, gentleness, not judging. I'm kind. I'm not always nice. There's a
Mhm.
difference.
Mhm.
Niceness involves an air of lying,
Yeah.
and kindness is like, here's truth,
Mhm.
and I'm going to say it in a way that honors you.
Mm.
That's like necessary, is needed for the now. And also considering is someone ready for whatever that is,
Mhm.
So I try to model what I hope they'll adopt in their own relationship, and it works.
Mm.
People look it up, and
Yeah.
eventually they find out, oh, you're not going to tear apart my heart. No, I'm not. Like, I'm going to honor your heart, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and I like to look at that as the um
Mhm.
the difference between being assertive or being aggressive, right? So the
Yes.
kindness is really being assertive. It's really kind to be assertive, because assertiveness leads to a win-win, right?
Mhm.
Aggressiveness leads to I win, you lose. And of course, passiveness goes to I lose, you win. So it's kind
Mhm.
of the assertive way that you're doing it is, I could see how that could be very, very helpful. And um, I know that you know, that the idea of polyamory is not part of your vocabulary when you talk to these people. You're
Mhm.
talking about monogamy, and
Right.
you know that that's kind of like the big thing now. Oh, I'm in a polyamorous relationship. Oh,
Yeah,
there's
I have couples I've
yes.
had couples that do it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I understand people think that it does, but when you truly want to be known and loved, that's not on the table.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I understand why. Right. So the polyamory, it's like, okay, oh, love, I have so much love to give, or oh, the spiritual, it's my spiritual, the orgasm is my spiritual my
Mhm,
spiritual connection with the universe, and why should that be limited to one person? But the way I
mhm,
look at it is that the most base primal instinct that we have is the drive to procreate. And for
mhm,
the male species, especially, it's to procreate with as many females as possible. That's the primitive, that's our
mhm,
animal drive. So we're animals, right? So we all have that animal drive, and I call that our automatic brain. But we also have our divine nature, which Laquilla
mhm,
is talking about with her relationship with God, and my relationship with God, and my feeling and my
mhm,
connection. And that divine nature is takes part of our animal primitive nature, but it blends it with the divine, and that's where
mhm,
monogamy comes in. It's sharing that
mhm,
beautiful, intimate, pleasurable experience, okay,
mhm,
with one person who you know and
mhm.
love. And I think that's probably, I think I know that's what you're going toward, Laquilla, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I try when I have people that are with me for sex therapy, I try to get them to redefine sex
Mm,
from just being like an animal, because we're not.
right.
We are people. We're not just skin, behind this is a spirit,
Mhm,
and I try to help people redefine sex holistically, mind, body, and spirit. When you're connecting with someone, it is not always just penetration. Sex is how you speak to your partner, it's how you look at your partner, it's how you help them out throughout the day, right? It's
mhm.
how you, it's even just a peck. It does not always have to be physical, but it is holistic. Like, am I being intimate in my heart with you, which is also very, very sexual,
Mhm,
to be able to open up the real part of who you are and say, here I am. I want to connect with you on this level. And I think we remove the beauty of sex as holistic, and in our society and in relationships that are surface, you just get the animal part, which is
right.
fun, but not whole. It's not
Mm,
whole. It's just one part of you. It's not going to be as fulfilling. And over time, you kind of train yourself to settle for less, you know,
yeah, yeah.
which is sad. It's
It
really
is
sad.
sad, absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
and, blending that, understanding, that we are, uh, Homo sapien animals, okay, but we are God has chosen us as, as
Mhm.
his children, let's say, and the divine part of us is within us and accessible to us. We are more than that, as you said, and that means that that part of us is important. It's very important, but it's not the only thing, as Laquilla is saying. As I agree with, you're helping people to open up in a more in that love and showing that true love, the
Mhm.
kind of the love when you hear people who have been through near death experiences, for instance, they'll almost cross the board, and there are tens of thousands, if not millions, of documented cases of these near death experiences, and
Mhm.
many say that they experience a love that it can't be put into words. And so that's
Yeah.
to me, that's the divine nature. That's God. That is God in us. That is God through us. And that
Mhm.
makes us truly whole people. So when when we're talking with people and when Laquilla, you're talking with someone, you know that. You respect that they're not just their body coming in with a
Right.
complaint, or they're not just their sex addiction, or when
Mhm.
somebody came to me complaining of back pain or some other type of problem, you got to certainly there are times when you need to intervene right away, and there's a
Mhm.
crisis, as you know. I'm sure there's a crisis. You
Mhm.
have to do what you have to do, but then after time, or with the majority of the others who don't aren't in crisis but are hurting, you need to intervene. And
Mhm.
I know that that's probably what you see in your practice, more of that
Mhm.
intervention rather than the crisis part.
Yeah, yeah, and with the intervention, I need to be optimistic, right?
Mm,
And I mean, thankfully, I am a pretty happy, optimistic person naturally, like, that's just
yes.
how God made me. I have a little sprinkle of joy, in
Uh-huh.
me.
You are. I can
But
vouch for that.
thank you. But, like, I will say when working with couples, especially for marriage and family therapists, we do need to be like incurable optimists because we are getting people, for the most part, who are in a place of, I don't know if we're going to make it.
Mm,
So I'm not trying to make people make their relationship work because not everyone should be together. It's just true.
yeah.
But I don't determine that. I just try to
Mhm.
get people healthy.
Yeah.
And as we're getting healthy, they might find we're healthier together, we're healthier apart.
Yeah.
If they're willing to do the work, sometimes, when I get couples, I'll first meet with them separately because I want to hear one side, the other. I need to assess for safety to see if they're even ready or
Mm,
able to do counseling because sometimes there's a history of abuse that's not yet resolved,
mm,
whether it's physical, sexual, or emotional. Like there has to be safety and boundaries. I don't do therapy when there's violence because
mm.
there's no safety. You can't,
Right,
you
right,
can't go deep.
right,
You're going
right.
to
Oh,
be
goodness. Yeah,
abused.
yeah.
So I'll do inventory, and just, are you ready? Are you even ready to begin? Can we begin? And then let's put some boundaries, respect and honor. We will speak in a way that is productive. If that doesn't happen, it gets cut off. I don't tolerate people destroying each other.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't do it in
yeah.
my own life. I don't tolerate it in
Right,
my own life, and I
right.
certainly don't wanna teach clients to allow pain. So, I do inventory first, and then we see, okay, once you're ready and yes, we're good, everything's safe, we can begin, then it's please be brave
Yeah,
because the places that we need to go are really deep.
yeah.
And ideally, they'd have their own therapist, private therapist outside of seeing me so they could be working on their stuff
Mhm,
within the safety of a private therapist and then also in couples counseling,
mhm.
they're
Yeah,
ready. But
yeah,
it is hard to look deeper. It is
yeah.
hard, but it's worth it. It is worth
Absolutely. Right, that's the short-term pain leading to long-term gain,
it.
and try to getting the quick fix,
Mhm,
oh, really the doctors we're always giving the quick fix, the quick pill, the quick,
mhm.
antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication, and like I
Yeah.
said, sometimes you need it to break the cycle, but
Yeah, it's
we're
helpful.
yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
trying to give the quick fix is it really in the long run doesn't work. I know that I'm sure you run into this where somebody is going outside the marriage and let's say going to a prostitute or something, and
Mhm.
it's probably you have to uh, raise that in the counseling because that could be
Yes.
dangerous to one of the other couple. Like how does that work? If in
Okay,
yeah.
so absolutely. So I've been doing this from 2014 till now. So I've been working with
Wow.
people for a while.
Wow.
I know,
Okay. I
right?
didn't realize that. Yeah, right.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And I will say the main thing I try to focus on is still not shame, but health. So I'll say, please, like a lot of times there's a secret, and I start with I won't do couples therapy if there's secrets. So that's also
Mm,
why I meet separately is I have a no secrets rule. So I'm not going to tell the secret, but I will meet separately until that person is ready to tell the secret. So let's
mm.
say the secret is still there,
Yeah.
right? I am now meeting with whoever is in an affair or not. It's not always a affair. Whatever is going on. I just focus on health. Okay. I'm not here to judge. They already know it's wrong. That's why it's
Mm.
a secret.
Right, right, right.
Okay. Like we know it's wrong.
Yeah.
But my thing that I go for is the seriousness of the risk.
Mm,
You know, it doesn't take that many different partners to develop HPV. It just doesn't. And when someone is constantly with someone, they don't always have to have penetrative sex. It could just the body and the fluids, which like that's
mhm.
enough for HPV
Yeah.
there, even in the mouth.
Right,
Oral
HPV,
sex.
just human papilloma virus, just to
Yes.
for those who don't know that, yeah.
Yes. And there's strands that can give cancer. So I just try to get to the core of you can kill your partner. Like,
Mm,
honestly, and unfortunately, it has happened that people have given their partner HPV
mhm,
to the strand that causes cancer, And so I try to just focus on I really need you to think about health, okay? Whatever you're labeling as fun could end their life.
mm,
And then outside of that, if there's some other disease or STI that they have, it could be dormant for a while until
mm,
it finally manifests, or you could give it to your child if
yeah,
your partner's pregnant, having children that have issues, it's a whole thing. So I try my best to say, let's just slow down. Let's not think about who's right or who's wrong. Let's look at health. Can you
mm,
at least choose to stop having sex with your partner? You're not ready to tell them like the truth of what's going on. Please don't put them at risk of their health.
wow, yeah,
You know?
yeah, that's great, and, in my practice, well, before when in my residency and internship, I was in New York City. I saw a lot of, this was in the early days of HIV, and I saw a lot of cases, but in my private practice, the only cases of HIV I ever saw were in couples who
Mhm,
were swingers,
mhm,
and we couldn't I didn't understand. I was, when I saw it, they confessed in a way that was their
mhm.
lifestyle, and that's how they got it. So it's could be very dangerous, in
Yeah.
that, and it's important to understand that
Yes.
it's, you might have this part of your addiction, but it's being very selfish, really. You're not judging. I'll be the one to judge here. I'll
Yeah.
say it. I'll
Yeah.
say it out loud. It's selfish,
Mhm,
because, and it's also very wrong to blame the victim. So
mhm.
somebody who's doing that will say, well, my wife doesn't want to have sex with me, so I'm going to go to a prostitute. It's her fault. So I mean, like the guy whose wife didn't want to have sex for 6 years. I mean, that's a problem. Okay. That's a real
Yeah.
problem. And,
Yeah.
I commend him in a way that he didn't, well, I didn't say commend him, but it should have been addressed early on. I mean,
Yeah.
not him going off and doing that, but there had to be, maybe go to you as a therapist early
Mhm.
on to see what's really the deal. Why does she not want to have intimacy with
Right.
her husband? That's a real problem, and that is something.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah, it is, and it's not always so I'll just say this,
yeah.
we're talking about addiction a lot. It's not always sexual addiction why people are hooking up and, you know, going outside of their marriage or their relationship. Sometimes there's an undiagnosed mental illness,
Mm,
you know? So, for example, with bipolar disorder, some of the symptoms of that is risky behavior.
mm,
So that might look like spending money. It might look like randomly having sex with
mm,
people, It might look like just
mm,
going out and thinking you should really climb a tree. It's
mm,
dangerous.
mhm,
And if someone gets used to befriend, right? Fight, flight, freeze, or befriend, if they get used to befriending as a way of surviving, it looks like, oh, we're just going to get used to your highs and lows and kind of just not really address it because we like when it's kind of calm for 2 weeks. No, right? That needs to
Mm,
be that too. So sometimes there is a mental illness. When that's not the case, and let's say someone's faithful. So on the other side of sexual issues is not having sex for a long time. You need to have sex in your
right.
marriage,
Right. Right.
but to not have sex for so long, it might not even be the couple within the relationship is having problems. It could be a secret from the past that's not
Mm,
related to cheating. It could be something like sexual trauma, abuse, unaddressed things that have not been dealt with, to where sex might feel like abuse, which they are not the same.
mm-hmm.
Sexual abuse and sex are not the same, but in someone's mind who has gone through trauma, it could blend and see the same, but it's not. One is power and control and oppression and aggression and abuse, and the other is like it's love shown in your body.
Mm,
A lot
yeah.
of fun. There's not a lot of fun in abuse. There's none, you
Right.
know, confusion and pain. And so to just not have sex with your partner, to look deeper, it might be a more painful story that needs to come out and be shared. And then, safety needs to be fostered. So I try to model that and encourage that, and hopefully the partners themselves can get to a place where they have those conversations and they could learn. And that's where sex therapy can come in. How do we get you reacclimated to touch and positions and so on over time?
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. It's hard to the trauma that what especially sexual trauma
Mhm.
can do. I knew a woman who in her teens was raped, and she became morbidly obese. She came to me morbidly obese, and when we were talking about it, she said that she feels she's this way because she doesn't want to feel attractive to men because of what happened to her. And she's afraid that if she's
Mhm.
attractive to men, this will happen to her again. So it was a way for her. Again, it's what you see on the surface is not the real issue, right? And it's teasing
Mhm.
that out and trying to understand. And fortunately, I wasn't equipped to do that for her. I recommended that she seek help, and unfortunately, it just wasn't
Mhm.
going to happen. So um, but
Yeah.
it's very sad when this isn't addressed, and it's important to know that in a relationship, when things aren't connecting, a lot of times it's money issues, it's
Mhm.
resentment issues, it's uh, uh,
Mhm.
inability to forgive, and um,
Mhm.
I think that that's why it's important, I think, to have some type of overarching faith that there's something larger at play here, and that it's just not
Yeah.
the 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 conflicts of everyday life that totally derail a relationship, because those things are transient, but they become so ingrained in us. And as you see in your practice, I know how
Mhm.
just money issues and health issues, just and
Yes.
fear of that. Like how does that, for instance, money, like does
Yeah.
and does that come up in your
Yes.
relationships? Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
A
Mm,
lot. Well, because
mm,
people place different value on money, and, depending on what they grew up with, right, their understanding on money is different. So, I try to talk through, what is the value and meaning that you're placing on money? Because sometimes people can have a poverty mindset, not because they don't have money.
right.
They probably do. They're in therapy. It's not
Yeah,
cheap. It's
yeah.
not 'cause they don't have money. It's because they have learned to like hold it and not experience money in a way that's healthy, and more balanced, or they go to the extreme where now that they have it, they're just not being responsible, not being responsible. So learning like how do we place value on money is important. For one
Yeah.
person, maybe they see it as status, another person might see it as fun, another person might see it as comfort or security, and just discussing that. So say if travel plans come up, what's the core issue that's happening with the arguments? Is it that you don't want to spend or you're spending too much? Or is it that you're afraid of whatever you learned from the past about money and poverty? Or is it that you're not afraid, but you haven't learned to be responsible? Or something else, right? But if you could agree on the value or how to maybe look at whatever the money decision is in a way that's productive and has deeper understanding, then you could be free of like the back and forth arguments, a little less at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of clear up this concept too of like, I know there's a saying, my money is your money and your money is my money. Isn't
Right.
that nice? It's
Right.
not true.
Right.
It's not true.
Yeah.
It's like you went to work. You went to that job for that many hours and you earned this, and they went to that. And so you come together to make a decision on what you will do with your funds as a pair, as a partner.
Yes. Right.
That's you
Yeah.
decide. It's not like suddenly it doesn't matter to you that you work really hard. That's not it.
Yeah.
So you have shared decisions, and based off of values and how people look at the structure of their marriage. It might be hierarchical, it might be more egalitarian. It really doesn't matter. It only
Yeah.
becomes an issue if they don't agree. If you have one person that's like, I want equal, and another one's like, I want hierarchy, then there's a problem. But even
Y-
that you can, talk about the deeper values and work it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. That's great. And, as I told you, with my thinking
Mhm,
about how my brain works and coming up with the idea of this automatic brain, and I look at especially money is a big one. And I know in my life, and how I had to kind of figure it out. I look at again, fight or flight. So as we're children, the culture of our household is our comfort. So whatever it
mhm,
is, I mean, it could be miserable. It could be
mhm,
miserable. It could be a horrible childhood, but in some way, where our neurons are making their connections between birth and adolescence,
mhm,
probably upwards of 95% of our connections have been made by the time we're an adolescent. So we've made connections. So those connections as children, even depending on the household. So let's say we grew up as Laquilla, as you're saying, as with a impoverished or a poverty mindset. That was comfortable for us. And what is comfort? Comfort is safety. Comfort
yeah,
is feeling good. So when we leave that comfort, the bells go off, danger, danger, right? And we
mhm,
fight or flee. So we could be, as an adult, we could be very, like you said, you have wealthier patients, let's say, who are willing to pay, and
mhm,
but they're still in a poverty mindset. They're probably in a poverty mindset because they're fighting and fleeing the danger, the fake
mhm,
danger of what
yeah,
they grew up in. So see, our brain is not that different from what it
mhm,
was to our cave dwelling ancestors. The only
mhm,
difference is that it's become more sophisticated. So our fight or
mhm,
flights are a little bit more sophisticated. And I think that that's what, you know, the relationship issues that we have, it's just another way of our fight or flight showing itself. We're not actually fighting or flight. Sometimes, unfortunately, there is,
yeah.
you know, but, a lot of times it isn't, and,
Yeah.
I see that probably you see it more in your relationship, and I know as a doctor, I would see that in other manifestations, whether it be
Yeah.
physical or
And
not.
getting stuck in our ways.
Mhm.
I have like this term of being passionately ignorant. right?
Mm.
Like sometimes we're just so sure that it has to be this way, my way, instead of being like, Let me get curious about why you're seeing things the way that you are."
Mm.
You know,
I
and then
love that.
again, to
Yeah.
build faith into it, when someone is of faith, right? For me as a Christian, as a believer, my money doesn't even belong to me.
Right.
It belongs to God. He
Yeah.
owns everything. And so when, someone's in a partnership, you kind of have to, for at least for a believer, how am I honoring God with my money?
Mm.
It belongs to him anyway. How am I honoring you as we discuss money? Am I being passionately ignorant? Do I need to take a step back and really hear you? The answer is yes. And I need to be heard.
Mm.
Like we need to decide together what is the best way to make use of these talents that God has given us, these resources that God has given us. How can we honor him and love people? Is like two main goals: love God and love other people as you love yourself. Am I
Mm.
loving myself? Well, what is my definition of love? Do I even really know what it is? Because if I'm thinking it's to just feel happy and fulfill myself, that's not it. It has a lot to do with serving each other, subbing out our mission, submission, sub out my mission for the greater good. It's not to be enslaved, it's not to be fearful, but it's partnering in a way that is honoring God with the resources that we have. And that is not boring.
No,
It does
no.
look like having fun.
Yeah.
And it does look like taking care of business,
Yeah.
and it does look like helping others. So
Yeah.
it's more holistic.
Yeah, I love that approach, and it is holistic because you
Mhm,
are focusing on, the idea of gratitude and acceptance and really embodying that in your words and your care and
mhm,
your guidance. And I know I try to practice that in my own life, is that idea of gratitude. I pray every night before I go to sleep and when I wake up. And one of the prayers I say is a Hebrew prayer, the Shema, and that is uh say, basically of affirming my belief in one God and loving
mhm,
God with all my heart and soul. And that is, looking at my life and my relationship and having the gratitude of the things
mhm,
I have rather than those that I wish I had or those that I think I should have. Because when you do focus on it, I'm sure, and you could talk about this, um,
mhm,
looking at your partner and what are those attributes of your partner that you fell in love with that you
mhm,
love, not the things that they don't do, or they don't leave the cap on the toothpaste,
mhm,
or they don't say tomato right, as I said in the joke, or
yeah,
whatever. I mean, what are the things that they have, their gifts and talents and skills and warmth
mhm,
and soul that you love, and instead of focus on that. So I'm sure that plays in with your, how you talk to people.
yes, I bring it back to friendship
Mm.
because at the end of the day, all relationships are the same. What separates romantic relationships, marital relationships, is the level of sex, play and sex and intimacy. But outside of that, all relationships are the same. We're meant to be really good friends,
Mm.
especially in a marriage. Like we're
Yeah.
supposed to be good friends. So when there's so many like little annoyances, it's kind of like, well, are you being a good friend right now? You know, like you could probably let that go,
Yeah.
come back
Right.
to building up the friendship. And
Yeah.
then at the same time, we are annoyed with our friends. You spend enough time
Right.
with a friend, like, for long enough on a vacation, and you might be like, "Why did you squeeze the tube that way?" You know?
Right.
Like, it's just
Right.
you need a break. It's just like
Yeah.
you need a break.
Right. Right.
You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I just read something very interesting today, actually. Um, it was a health article about relationships, and it was advocating for Um, and I didn't like this term they used that for in a relationship for each party to have a secret, and it's not a secret. It's really each person to have something that they do on their own, and so
Yeah.
this way they can come together when they go out on a date and share those things. So I don't know why the author said secret because it's not really a secret. It's
Yeah.
something that you enjoy doing by yourself on your own, okay? And
Mhm.
then coming together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
And
that
the
was
kids
good.
come together, right? So yes, there's the difference with like marriages is the sexual part, but it's also the commitment. With a friendship, you'd be like, I think we hit our limit.
Right,
We're done. Right? But
right.
with the committed relationship, there is the understanding of like, I am in this because I know you and value you, right? And I'm a whole person. So that secret thing, it's really like what part of me is whole that I'm also investing in that I could share with you because we're not meant to fill everything in each other. We should have our own lives while being together and it makes it more interesting and not boring.
Yeah,
Like I want
yeah,
to hear about your race. I want to hear about, this event. I don't need to be there for that to happen? Like, I
yeah.
do not enjoy that, but you do, and I'm curious because you're my friend and my partner, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think, so the 2 parts are greater than or the whole is greater than the sum of the 2 parts. And that's, you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, but when we come together, the whole is greater. It's not just
Mhm.
1 plus 1 equals 2, it's 1 plus 1 equals 100, and
Yeah.
it's also, I think, important uh, to realize that especially if you're coming from a home that was broken, a divorced
Mhm.
home, not to always have one foot out the door. So again, if you came from a broken home, that might have been your comfort zone. Again, the hell it might be safer than the heaven you don't know because it's the
Mhm.
safety net and you want to get out of that
Mhm.
hell, but you can't because it's comforting, and every time you try to leave you fight or flee back into that. And if that's
Mhm.
what you learned as a child, then sometimes people get into relationships and they say, well, if it doesn't work out, there's always divorce. I mean,
Mhm.
if you have one foot out the door, you can't be all in, right? So,
Exactly.
do you see
Yeah.
that?
I do. And you know what that is, in my opinion, a lot of it is not being whole before you get
Mm,
to someone.
yeah,
So I would love for people to stay married if they're healthy. I'm
yeah,
not against people getting divorced. I do also do divorce therapy. I'm not like, I hope you get divorced.
right. Of
I'm
course
not.
not. Yeah.
You made a commitment, hold to it.
Hmm.
As long as it's safe and healthy, and there isn't abuse. But all that to say, not knowing someone and getting married anyway is part of the problem that I see
Mm,
now is the infatuation, what people are labeling as love, which could last, like I said, up to 2 years. And in that place of like, oh, you're so wonderful, you know,
hmm.
they make a commitment, but they don't know each other. And part of the knowing would be the history of the broken home. Everyone has brokenness in their story,
Mm,
right? That can't be undone. We're on planet Earth. We're gonna suffer. This is part of our humanity.
hmm.
But if you don't resolve it or at least choose to start to work on your stuff before you get into a relationship, you don't have to be perfect. I'm not looking
Right,
for perfect,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Like, well, I see people always, no one's perfect. I would love for us to stop saying that.
Right, right.
It's about
Yeah,
health. Of
yeah,
course, no one's perfect,
yeah, yeah.
but we want health. And if you could
Yes.
get healthy and start to get yourself together before you're with someone, there's less of that, like, I just recreated my family system because I never resolved or learned how to not attach in a way that is so painful, you know?
Yeah.
You wanna in a healthier state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I kind of look at, yeah, and unfortunately, people may say, "Oh, you're just not a romantic, Dr. Glassman." I would say that there are more than one soulmate that you have in this
I
life.
agree.
Okay, but it's not that you can't make your partner your soulmate, right?
Mhm.
So it's like as you were saying, the infatuation, falling in infatuation or falling into lust, or
Mhm.
falling in lust instead of falling in love, or falling in infatuation instead of falling in love. To understand what that is, when someone says that oh, I know I'm in love because I felt butterflies and I felt my heart beating fast. Well, guess what? That's actually an automatic fight or flight reflex. Okay. So it doesn't mean you're in
Mhm.
love. It means something about that person is maybe intimidating, or you may feel insecure about, or you may be attracted to them. Don't get me wrong. It may be attractive, but because you're attracted, you're kind of nervous, really. It's not really that that's a sign of love, that, oh, he gave me butterflies, or she gave me palpitations or whatever. No, I mean, really, oh, I just want to find my person. Okay. Well, your person, like you're saying, look, well, all right. There's more than one person for you. Okay. I love
Yes.
my wife. Don't get me wrong. I've been married, it's going on 35 years. Okay. I love my wife, and we have
Yeah.
a great relationship. Perfect? No, but we have a great relationship. Laquilla
Mhm.
knows us and knows my
I
wife,
love
and
her
right,
too.
yeah. But
She's one of
again,
my soulmates.
right,
She
right, right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, but
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, she'll tell you also there's other soulmates but I'm her
Mhm.
soulmate and she's my soulmate because we've
Mhm.
chosen that. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah, that's important. But right. So
Yeah.
what do you say about it? Do people say that to you, Laquilla? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love them and I just knew. That's
Mm,
not love. Love is a choice and it's unconditional.
mm,
We actively choose to have behaviors, okay, of kindness, of gentleness, of being able to enter into the pain that the other person has,
mm,
and journey with them, not to fix it, but to be with them in a compassionate way, you know?
yeah.
It, it's not just butterflies. It's nice to have them. They don't always last
Right.
and they come and but if
Right.
you're doing love in a healthy way, it will last, it will endure because it's a choice to first love yourself and then love the other person, you know? Well,
Mm,
love God, because you have to. We learn to be loved because we receive it. But,
mhm.
it's a choice, it's an active choosing into that person, not
Yeah.
again, we want to have boundaries there because sometimes like we said, wounding could skew that, and we might mislabel remaining with something that's abusive as
Mm,
opposed to remaining with someone who is growing, right? So we don't want to mess that up, right?
yeah.
Don't stay with things that are tearing apart your heart consistently without compassion. That's dangerous. When relationships don't make it, in my opinion, what I have seen, and I'd say most people do well and they make it that I have been with. But for those that haven't, it is because of a lack of compassion and a lack of a desire to take ownership
Mm.
or to enter into the pain that was caused. I get people who say, "Oh, I can't fix it. I'm sorry. Isn't that enough?" No, it's not enough. You feel the pain with your partner
Mm,
and grieve with them. Become curious about that, especially if you caused the pain, you
mm,
know?
yeah.
Especially not just, "Okay, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." No, it's not enough. It's actually not enough. We have
Mm,
to feel the pain with, or else we're gonna repeat it. We're doomed
yeah.
to repeat until we
Mm,
really feel the weight of how it hurt me to hurt you,
mm,
or it hurts hurts me that you're hurt by XYZ.
Mm. Yeah. Wow.
And I am choosing you despite that. There is a safe space, what I try to model in counseling. There's a
Yeah.
safe space for your pain, and I'm with you in it. That's
Wow.
how you last. But when it's like, oh, it's like, get over it,
Right.
you will lose your spouse.
Right.
I said I'm sorry 10 times. You said you forgive me. What's the big deal? The pain is the big deal. You
Yeah.
don't rush past pain. Rushing
Mm.
past it's like repeating trauma
Wow.
or choosing another person who's familiar to the pain instead of recognizing like, oh, this needs to be healed so I could choose better.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah, great. Wise words, Laquilla. They're great. I really appreciate you, coming on and talking with us and sharing your experience and having a great conversation about relationships and how that affects our health and how it can elevate our health or it can take away from it. It could worsen our health or take away from it. So thanks again, Laquilla, for being here. And I'm going to sign off right now, ending the podcast. And as you know, I urge you and thank you again for joining me and
Thank you.
urging you, thanks, and urging you, all of my listeners, to stay strong in mind, in body, but most importantly, in soul. Bye for now.